What's up, everyone, and welcome to the TDR Trade to Black podcast here on the Benzinga TV Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Whew, what a week. Been hit hard, obviously, in the cannabis space. We're going to break it all down as to what went wrong, what we can anticipate moving forward as we give you a comprehensive look on the industry as a whole, psychedelics and crypto as well, as we look at market coverage this week and how we closed, obviously, here on late aftermarket Friday. So let's welcome in our co-host, as usual, our lead financial writer from TDR, Benjamin A. Smith. You alive?
I feel like I should be wearing a flak jacket after this week, but other than that, I'm doing good personally.
Oh, man.
Unbelievable.
Tough week, that's for sure. Anthony Verano, AV, good to see you, sir. How are you?
It's good.
Anthony Verano.
Yeah, I'm here. It's good. It's a rough day. We'll get through it. I mean, it is what it is. You can't really take too much into
the realist
into the daily price movements.
It is what it is. That's for sure. Okay, we're going to talk about how the market performed. We'll dive right into it. We begin first segment one, Into the Wire, outlining all the major headlines today in cannabis and psychedelics. I guess let's start with, I will get into details and how this market performed in our second segment, but right now, want to begin with the state of Ohio and the impact it could have on the state of Michigan if and when recreational legalization is approved by voters, Anthony. So you want to explain maybe a little further on what this impact actually means and why I bring that up?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. It was an interesting article that I read on issue 2 in Ohio that's currently being voted on for adult use. I was reading actually that not a lot, but there are legal cannabis market participants in the state of Michigan, license holders, that are against issue 2 in Ohio because they're trying to play defense. I don't like seeing this. If they were naming names, I would call those names out. I think that everybody should be collectively behind adult use conversion in states. I mean, if you're trying to play defense and basically vote against what is legal in your state in another state just because that neighboring state's coming over your border to get adult use cannabis, like, I don't really think you have a place in this industry. What interested me the most, though, is compounding that. We had news today that the first low-dose THC products are going through pharmacies in Georgia. I think adult use conversion in Florida has been a popular topic for some time now. Yeah. And I think that people need to start looking at markets as to how these surrounding markets can affect them on a long-term basis. I would be betting that we're probably getting a lot of business from the state of Georgia in our medical program.
You think?
I'd be willing. Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to bet that some of it's vultured. But then in the adult use markets in the Northeast, like, just look at the surrounding areas, look at what's coming in, and look at what you get access to. I mean, that Midwest corridor, there's a reason why Michigan, Illinois, Oklahoma, Missouri, those adult use markets are getting market share from their surrounding jurisdictions. So seeing a normalizing event or their neighboring states flip into adult use, the impacts on those markets years down the line is going to be something interesting to watch. And I'm only bringing this up because we always have so much interest in Michigan. And as they're doing $270 million a month right now,
yeah,
I'm going to be curious to see if there's any degradation in those numbers with Ohio's adult use coming online.
Go blue, baby.
I mean, there would have to be, because we saw this dynamic happen in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, where, Pennsylvania is only medical, and a lot of sales are going over to the border, from border cities like Philadelphia over the Delaware River to New Jersey for adult use. So I would expect to see some degradation as well, but it will be interesting to see how much and whether organic growth just from expanding consumer base can kind of make up for what's lost from people coming over from border cities and states that are not legal.
Is there a heavy population? I'm trying to understand population-wise. There's 21 million in Florida, correct?
23, I think.
23 million?
Most recent, yeah.
But most of them, like, I don't, like, is there a lot of, like, where's the closest city along the Georgia border in Florida? It's quite a ways away, is it not?
Atlanta's far, but I mean, there's a lot. I mean, you've got Georgia, you've got Alabama, you've got Mississippi. I mean, there's a ton of states bordering Louisiana borders the Panhandle. There's a lot of dispensaries in the Panhandle that are. But Florida's obviously not adult use yet. So I mean, those out of state consumers aren't coming and getting Florida medical cards. I would be more so worried about places like Michigan.
Yeah. Competitive edge. Wolverines, Buckeyes, baby. Because they clash. But anyways, let's go to headline number 2. Ben, an interesting take here. The DEA, keeping on cannabis, perhaps the hottest topic over the past 60 days that we discussed. Basically, the HHS, when they released a letter, the DEA on rescheduling cannabis, we've all heard the news on the recommendation. Now the cannabis community can actually see the actual wording of the letter, which was released earlier this week by the Federal Health Agency. So what exactly did it entail, what we, I guess, don't already know?
So I think actually one of the biggest takeaways is even though they released the letter, though almost the entire thing was redacted. So it was only a version of a brief version of the letter, and most of it you can't even see what they actually said. So I think this kind of speaks to the transparency of the whole thing. And I found it kind of odd that they're almost treating this like a classified information. Like,
what do you expect, though?
I'm sorry?
What do you expect? What do you expect?
Well, I mean, possibly they have some information there that they don't want to divulge, but it almost seems like, sort of a lack of transparency. I mean, this is cannabis. This is not U.S. defense.
Yeah.
This is not the JFK files, right? But they redacted. Sorry, go ahead.
Lack of transparency in the U.S. government kind of goes hand in hand.
Right, but you'd expect that for something like the JFK files or top secret information, but to redact like 90% of it and not letting you even see things like the scientific research involved that they're considering, it just seems a little over the top. I mean, I could be wrong. That was just my impressions, and I think that got a lot of play on social media with people sort of thinking about the same thing because people want to see transparency, and there's never people are kind of tired of the way things have been.
Yeah, well, Don Murphy said the other day with Mike Johnson being appointed, I wouldn't read too much into this as far as safe not passing. But to your point, Ben, it's just it'd be nice to catch a break, from Washington. And, it's information that we already know. And it's good to actually see this letter in writing as to what was included. But, man, it sure would be nice to obviously get some sort of bounce in the right direction from Washington that pertains to this industry, right? As much as Don is saying don't read too much into this.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of conflicting information out there. There was a dialogue actually today. It was put out by Natalie Fertig, showing that basically Gates didn't think that him and Mike Johnson had much in common when it comes to cannabis policy, suggesting that it may not be introduced anytime soon. So a lot of conflicting information. Maybe that's the case. It just goes in to show the lack of transparency, lack of clarity with the timelines and things like that. And we kind of, perhaps see it reflected in the market this week.
John Verville, good to hear from you. Forget daily movements, Anthony. I'm looking at weekly, monthly, and yearly. I know this is somewhat what I signed up for. Isn't it indeed in the life of a cannabis investor, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's switch now to news from yesterday where a coalition of U.S. MSO cannabis operators filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts. So what did this lawsuit entail? We're actually going to bring in our featured guest actually here today. He is the CEO of New Lake Capital, which trades on the OTC under the ticker symbol NLCP, and a friend of the podcast, Anthony Cogniglio. Good to see you.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Yeah, good to see you.
Happy Friday, indeed.
Tough week, huh?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I wanted to bring you on and get your take because I know you had, your thoughts on this whole lawsuit. But maybe first explain to our viewers, what they should take away from this, and are you in support of this lawsuit?
Yeah, for sure, I'm in support of the lawsuit. I think the key takeaway is nothing's going to come of this anytime soon.
Right?
And so it doesn't change for this to be successful. And I think they even get to the heart of it when they did the announcement in the press release. This isn't about winning in a local court. This is about making it all the way to the Supreme Court, so they could change policy across the U.S. I believe that's their end goal here, and that just takes a long time. There's no way you'll work through the various courts, whether it be the local court up to the circuit court and then ultimately the Supreme Court. It's going to take a couple of years, I think, for it to wind through. I don't think this is one of those policies that will fast track through the court system.
So maybe walk us. Go ahead, Anthony.
I think that's a good point, but I think also what are we looking at here that doesn't have a long tail timing wise? Because let's be real. Schedule 3, even if the DEA comes out and says yes tomorrow, we're probably looking 12 to 18 months before implementation, it gets challenged, etc. Safer, even if it goes through the House and the Senate, you're going to get injunctions, you're going to get challenging. 12 to 18 months we're probably looking at as well. This lawsuit, same thing. So, I mean, it's almost as if stop looking at this stuff because it's not going to have any effect anytime soon. I mean, I don't want to say I'm frustrated, but it's kind of like,
oh, you're frustrated.
We keep talking about this stuff, and it's like
I can't tell.
Yeah, it's like where's it?
Today.
I mean, I'm just being a realist. Like, we're looking at long-term time horizons. Meanwhile, we're talking about these catalysts on a daily basis.
Yeah,
and everybody from a capital markets perspective is hanging on every single word as it relates to all of these that we have no control over, and the time horizon is way out there. So it's like, where do we go from here? And I mean, me personally, I'm looking at adult use conversion, earnings season, and starting to get back focused on the businesses, not things that we can't control. And I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, Anthony, actually looking at the assets and looking at what the space is comprised of, which we can control versus what we can't.
I couldn't have said it better. I mean, you're exactly right. In my opinion, it's not going to change the operations of any of the companies in the sector for at least the next couple of years, even if all this stuff happens. And so, at the margin, where I think this is a positive is it just shows that there's yet another avenue that's being pursued to normalize cannabis. Yeah. And so each one of these is another marker along that path. And I think it works to incrementally get investors that aren't currently interested in the space to continue to stay maybe focused on it, looking at it in the background, getting ready for it, and not necessarily forgetting it. I think that's the biggest upside of it. But yeah, like from a stock perspective and a valuation perspective, it's about what these companies can drive in cash flow over the next 12 months.
Yeah. There's some notable names included in this lawsuit. I will go back to that. Ascend Wellness, Terracin, GTI, Eminence Capital, and Poseidon Investment Management, who are all in support of this lawsuit. What are they ultimately looking to get out of this? Even though it's going to take a while, but ultimately, what are they looking to get out of this lawsuit?
I believe they're looking to do a service to the industry in terms of fighting that legalization fight, but they'll all benefit from the legalization in various forms. And what's interesting, when you read the actual complaint that was filed, many of those names aren't in it. I think it was very thoughtful about the names that were used. There's, one is a farm, right? So they're hitting from a farmer's perspective. One's a slightly larger business. And so they're hitting different businesses in and around the industry in, I think, a smart way to try to appeal to the courts that will hear this, that this has a broad impact, not just on any one particular cannabis company.
Yeah, and I think it's also, go ahead, Ben.
That's a really good point, Anthony, that you bring that up, that it wasn't just MSOs. It looks to me as well that they try to represent with some of the smaller players, private and Pubco. They didn't want the optics to just be purely for, the tier ones in the sector. So that was noted. But I guess I'd like to ask you, do you think, even though this, like a final verdict and appeal potentially to the Supreme Court or whatnot won't happen for a while, is the goal here to, like pile up pressure along with all these other initiatives, like have its own, sort of legal pressure in order to advance the ball forward even before a verdict comes in place? Do you think that moves the needle at all?
I can't speak for their intentions, right? And so you should chat with them for what their intentions are. But I think certainly this will dial up the pressure at the court, because there's other activities going on in the legal sphere related to cannabis. Notably, there's a number of cases that are kicking around circuit courts related to cannabis and guns. And it's interesting, you had, I believe it was the Fifth Circuit, there was a case out of Mississippi where the Fifth Circuit court ruled that it was unconstitutional to ban a gun owner because of cannabis possession in compliance with state law. There's currently a case that was just heard earlier this month out of Florida in, I think it's the 11th Circuit, where they're wrestling with that same issue. If that circuit court rules the other way, you will now have two U.S. circuit courts with conflicting opinions, which kind of forces it up to the U.S. Supreme Court potentially to rectify that. So think about those paths in line with what's the path for this, and will that force them to take this on? Like, I don't think them dropping this lawsuit was coincidental that it was yesterday, nor coincidental that it was shortly on the heels of the rescheduling recommendation. You look at the heart of what they're going after here, they'll be able to use that rescheduling for their benefit in the lawsuit to the extent that it actually comes to fruition. So I think these folks are very well thought out. I think they spent a lot of time, right? This has been talked about. I think Abner Curtin talked about this on an earnings call over a year ago.
Yeah.
And so they've been spending a lot of time strategizing around this. And so I think this will encompass a lot of components that they're thinking maybe in a couple of years all come together to get the Supreme Court to make a ruling around the Controlled Substances Act. But what's interesting is they're not asking for legalization across the land necessarily with interstate commerce. Really, when you read through the text, they're focused on intrastate commerce, saying that the federal government can't intercede, in this case, Massachusetts, where the case came. Again, another smart venue because they're probably looking at the First Circuit and they're probably saying, wow, like those will be friendly judges to this. But they're saying you can't regulate our activities inside the state of Massachusetts. They're not making the argument you should make cannabis legal across the land. And they're saying you should leave this to the states.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's smart. I mean, I think it needs to ultimately be left to the states. And I mean, I don't think federal legalization is really what any of us want, especially from a business perspective right now. I mean, it's the machine happens to be working quite well. Mayor, the lawsuit's actually pretty slick from a strategic standpoint because Mayor Toby actually brought up a pretty good point this afternoon. Gay marriage, which eventually got legalized by the Supreme Court, was legal in 37 states with a 56% popularity rate. Pretty analogous to cannabis, as we're now legal in 38 states and over a 70% popularity rate from a social perspective. So, I mean, there has been a W here with the hot button issue that both sides of the aisle didn't agree on. It did get to the Supreme Court and got through. But the one thing that we have working against us, I would guess in that regard, is the Supreme Court's pretty conservative now, to say the least, in their composition.
Nice point.
I think it's a great point, a great analogy, but let's speak to that conservatism of the court. Again, I am not an expert in the Supreme Court, and so at some point maybe bring somebody on, but I've spent some time looking at this and actually tracking these other cases around guns because I think there's a real strong case, and you see it very much in SAFER with Section 10, right? I believe like if ever we're going to get SAFER done, it's going to be on the back of Section 10, not because people want to legalize or are in support of cannabis necessarily. But when you look back to the Supreme Court case back in 2005 that this lawsuit references, there was a basis for that opinion, which was not just conservatives. It was actually a combination of conservatives and liberals that came together to make that ruling. And this lawsuit goes right at the reasoning for that opinion. And in fact, there were a couple of years ago, there was a court case. I forget the name of the case that went to the Supreme Court, but Justice Thomas actually almost invited this type of a challenge in his dissenting opinion by saying perhaps the federal government has abdicated its right to regulate cannabis, given it sat on the sidelines for so long. And the instances from that 2005 case no longer are present, or the facts that were cited by the court then. So I do think there's some reasonable basis. Again, not a legal scholar here for sure, but from a layman's perspective, this is starting to hang together. And when put together with gun rights, there could actually be some real traction here to get this right.
Yep, I agree. Momentum's building. I know it takes time, and it's not. I know we want responses and answers right away, but think about some of the years that you've just outlined and how much change there's been. Like even in a past couple of years, I think the biggest thing I take away is that I think a lot of people have these perceptions of big pharma not wanting, cannabis to, succeed. I don't think they care whatsoever, and I really do think there's just a lot of politicians that aren't up to speed on what's going on within this space. But the more and more attention that's brought to it, it's a calculated decision. I think it's probably wise on their behalf, and it was obviously executed at a certain time that will make sense later on down the road. But there's always a plan in place, right?
Well, what I love is I love this industry isn't going quietly into night, as you might say. No. This industry is fighting back, and it's fighting back along a number of fronts. The injustices that have incurred to communities harmed by the war on drugs, the unfairness that's going on today with businesses that are struggling under an oppressive tax regime. This industry isn't taking its laying down. And I love that about this industry. There's people
Yeah.
that are going to fight for their rights, people that are going to fight for their business. And I think that passion will ultimately overcome. And I think gay marriages, come back to what you had said before, Anthony. It's a really good analogy, right? There was a long struggle. I'm not trying to equate the two topics at all, but there was a long struggle there, and a lot of people were fighting for justice in that, and then we're able to find it. And perhaps this is the avenue to find that.
Yeah. Fighting back, that's key. Who are you fighting back against? What weight class you entering in at, Anthony? We going middleweight?
Such a personal question.
I'm not going to divulge that information right now, right? Anyways, I got my money on you, buddy. But listen, appreciate you checking in. Let's keep in touch, and we'll check back with you next week, okay?
Yeah, great talking with you guys.
All right.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good guy, to say the least. Smart guy, that's for sure. Let's touch on next headline. We'll continue on news from Washington. Wanted to touch on the bipartisan congressional lawmakers refiled the marijuana legalization bill this week. So what's changed here, Bren, from the original version? Like, could there be some meaningful changes?
I don't think there's too many meaningful changes. I mean, we don't have the text yet. That hasn't been released, but it's just basically refiling of the States Act, which is short for the Strengthening the 10th Amendment Through Entrusting States Act. And that was designed to address the conflict between federal and state laws regarding marijuana. So it's almost goes in hand with this lawsuit that we just talked about. They want, to really strengthen the states' rights when it comes to marijuana laws and not have the federal government encroach. So that's been refiled. I think the big wild card here is, let's see what happens with Mike Johnson as speaker. Again, that goes to SAFER. I mean, is it prioritized? And if so, when is that? So there's a little bit of a wild card in that mix, but good to see that, the filing of bills in Congress is still, taking shape.
So a good thing then, getting all your ducks in a row as we see some changes with the House, right?
Yeah, I mean, that'll be imperative.
Yeah. All right. This is the TDR Traded Black podcast on the Benzinga TV Network. That concludes our first segment, Into the Wire, highlighting the biggest headlines in cannabis and psychedelics. And it was cannabis heavy today. And we go into segment number 2. Now we look at basically our daily movers as to who we're watching and why. And again, we'll stay on the cannabis narrative. Anthony, tough week for the industry. However, there's one company that's holding strong. That's Air Wellness.
That's a little strong statement. I don't know about
holding
strong. I don't think anything's holding strong right now.
It's fighting. It's fighting.
I mean, Air's relatively strong to its peers, as it's probably one of the only stocks that hasn't round tripped the HHS announcement yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if I was a betting man, I would expect it to do that. But I mean, right now it's sitting at about $1.18. It's, I think the low, or I think where it was sitting at when the HHS announcement hit us was about 73 cents.
Yeah.
I think you got to be patient right now. I mean, not to use a poker analogy, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm waiting until I get pocket aces and then going all in. I'm in a lot of cash right now. I'm being patient, and I think patience is going to pay off here. Like I said, we're all speculating around of things that we can't control. I think we need to start focusing on things that we can, and that's the fundamental nature of the businesses. Yep. You saw TerraSend pre-announce. You saw Ascend pre-announce. Both of those pre-announcements showed growth. Both of those announcements, or at least TerraSend's did, showed margin improvement. Yep. Ascend's showed both top-line improvement and EBITDA improvement. That needs to be what we're talking about here moving forward. Yeah, because if we're sitting here weeks and months down the road talking about Schedule 3 SAFER, this lawsuit, things that we have no control on and are completely speculative, we're all going to go nuts, to be honest.
The only thing is, until we change human nature, that's what people are going to talk about, because they look at their portfolios, they see red, they see green, so they're either euphoric or they're not. But you're right. I mean, theoretically, if you have the long-term focus, you should think about, what the businesses are doing. It's tough for people to turn off their portfolio watch, and
I don't think your portfolio can be any more red moving forward. I mean, we literally round trip to where HHS announcement came out. Curaleaf is there, Cannabis is there, Jushi's there. You think they're going to take out the all-time lows?
Yeah, I mean, it could. I mean, MSO is closed at 519. So everybody knows that, the vote in Ohio is probably going to pass. Everybody knows earnings season's coming up. And that's what kind of actually surprised me with the price action. The fact that you had an early reporter, Ascend Wellness, they're actually very positive this week. They're up like 15% this week.
They're up 7%. They're up 7% today.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's what I'm saying. That despite the fact that it's not a tier one, but despite the fact that we had like a mid-major produce these good numbers, and with earnings season coming up, I would have thought that maybe the market would see more of an anchor of support, but it wasn't meant to be. It was all dominated by Johnson, macro, and negative sentiment.
Yeah, but I mean, wait, you're saying the up 15% this week is not a win?
I didn't say that at all. I said I was actually agreeing with you that if it wasn't for human nature, the focus should be on earnings, companies that produce good earnings. Perhaps there could be some stabilization here. Perhaps they might even rally in a bad macro environment. But that's not, people didn't take that cue. Unfortunately, other things are overlooked.
An interesting theme on Twitter today was everybody looking into MSOX to buy it. And I mean, I don't think I'd be stashing a leveraged ETF right now.
No.
In these conditions. I mean, granted,
especially
I will always
data burn.
Yeah,
when it goes in reverse, it goes in reverse.
What was the industry as a whole down how much this week? Do you know?
A lot.
I didn't do the final calculations. Oh, definitely double digits. I think it closed at 660 last week and it's down to 519. So almost probably close to 20%, 18, high teens, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Listen, Stephen A talks about MJ and LeBron. Here in Cannabis, we talk about safer, rescheduling, and legislation. We got to continue on that narrative train. Okay.
Sounds good.
I'm all for it. You got to talk about both. I mean, I think you got to keep the long-term focus, but you also got to talk about what's currently happening.
Got to bring that up.
Want to know what's currently happening.
People want to know that stuff. Anthony's just ready to kill someone today. All right,
I'm gonna put a dartboard in my office moving forward with safer, Schedule 3, and the federal lawsuit. I guess the state lawsuit in Massachusetts.
All right.
You're not going to put my picture on it, are you? Because I tend to call things out like it is. You're not going to throw the dart right between my eyes.
No, right? If anybody's picture is going up there, it's Alan Brockstein. But I'll not do that for the
he's on a roll
for the sake of everybody.
Okay, let's get this podcast done. All right. Stock number 2. I like this company a lot. We actually had a great interview with Jesse Shannon, their key chief commercial officer, yesterday. And it's former Columbia Care, now the Cannabis Company Holdings. Ben, you're watching this. Tough week for this company. But like I said, this company's got a lot of things going positive for it. But, man, was it hit hard this week.
They have definitely a lot of things positive going for it. They have, let me get the numbers here. They have 94 dispensaries, I believe. Let me give you the exact total. 94 dispensaries, 31 cultivation and manufacturing facilities, including 14 dispensaries in Florida. Things are seemingly going pretty well. They've recently rebranded, and also they're one of the smart companies that actually raised money during the HHS run. So there were very few companies, maybe 2 or 3, that actually did, and they were one of them. So it's really surprised. So they shored up their balance sheet, they reduced debt, and yet this week was an absolute train wreck for them in terms of price action, not for anything that they've done. And that was kind of surprising. Well, we're back to near the Cresco acquisition lows. So I was surprised by that. It was down 27% today. And I think it is nothing to do with, it's nothing company specific. It just goes to show the state of the market right now, where good companies, very solid companies, performing companies are getting, unfortunately, sold.
Well, to your point, Anthony, sitting in cash right now, this is playing out the way you want it to.
Yes, but I'd prefer if it wasn't, all things considered. And I mean, obviously the Cannabis is a paid client of ours. I mean, we're pretty close with Nick and the rest of the C-suite, but I mean, I don't understand for the life of me how a company with the footprint that the Cannabis has is down 40% this week.
Yeah.
They have 8 dispensaries. Is over 50.
Yes.
I was just thinking about the last 2 days. So, I mean, they have 8 dispensaries in New York that are all medical that will flip rec. They're in Ohio. They're in Illinois. They're in Virginia. They're in Florida. They're in New Jersey. They've got a large cultivation facility that when wholesale comes online can service the entire state of New York outside of their dispensaries. Like, this company is it's egregious. Where the share price is.
Yeah.
CapEx is already built too. Nicholas mentioned that. So their gross margins have probably bottomed. They've troughed, and they're probably on the upswing over the next few quarters.
Yeah. This is mind-boggling to me. how this company could do that. I think that they're probably going to shift the narrative with their next earnings report. I'm expecting to see growth in it. I'm expecting to see growth, top line growth, margin expansion. And I mean, I'll look forward towards earnings. I think they're coming out November 9th. I'm sure we'll have Nick on to cover them. But yeah, the price action here. I mean, there's a lot of companies where you could say that their credit or debt to equity profile, like they're not healthy businesses from a balance sheet perspective. They're in the wrong markets. This business checks all the boxes.
Yeah,
from what you want to see in a cannabis business. If I was talking to a family member or someone close to me that said, all right, well, there's the sector's been decimated. Where should I start? This is a pretty damn good starting point.
Yeah.
For where this business is right now.
If I can just weigh in here for a second, one of my big takeaways from the previous interview that we did was it was the way they look at brands, right? So instead of most companies looking at the East and West Coast paradigm, they actually look at sort of like micro regions or cities, like individual jurisdictions, and that's why they are such a recognized as a very good branding company, because they take in local consumer preferences into effect more than just East Coast, West Coast. It's like down to the specific metropolis, and that served them very well.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Hector Lopez. Awesome guy.
Dude. So Hector, I've known for
Love this guy.
8 years, probably 7 or 8 years now. Hope you're well, Hector. Glad to see that you're still actually in the space. But he's a great guy, super knowledgeable. Met him on Facebook, and we went back and forth for years on the Canadian stuff, on the US stuff, and he's a great dude overall. So thanks for watching, Hector, and hope you're well.
Yeah, as well. God bless, Hector. I've had a few conversations with you too, but appreciate you logging on, man. You're one of the original OGs, that's for sure, pertaining to this space. Our last stock we're going to look at right now, we'll switch to the psychedelic space and Atai Life Sciences. 48 hours ago, Ben, we touched on how it was testing all-time lows. 48 hours later, the company is now through all-time lows as we cover yet another just unbelievable sector right now.
And 48 hours later, we talked about how how the psychedelic sector collectively, ex-Cybin, which is doing really well and executing, Doug's doing a great job, is basically a dumpster fire from a price actions perspective. And it's very similar in the way the cannabis sector is working out, in terms of there's an increase in total addressable market. All the research, literally all the research, has been positive and shows efficacy with mental health disorders from PTSD all the way through depression and anxiety. But yet it keeps forging new lows because the plumbing isn't there. There's not the developed institutional trading base and retail trading base, for that matter. So Atai Life Sciences is one of those casualties. And I think, we talked about, I'm not into catching falling knives. Irrespective of what I think about the company. So you might want to wait here, but it's through the lows. And I think it would serve them well to get a good phase study under the belt, like phase 2, because they haven't, had the most ideal start there, but it's definitely something on my radar. And I'm watching when XBI turns around, perhaps in the new year, come January, when tax loss is all, gone. That might be something I want to pick up.
You got to wonder what Christian Agermeyer is thinking right now. What was the IPO? Was it 16, 17 bucks?
Around there.
Was it 13, or I think it was 13, and didn't it get upsized to like 16 or 17?
Yeah. Valuation.
It was an impressive IPO.
It
was quite an impressive IPO. That being said, I mean, we are where we are right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I mean, Cybin is arguably the only investable company in this space right now. With their patent announcements, with the closing of Small Pharma, with their data coming out. I personally wouldn't look at anything in the space other than them right now.
Yeah, I think Cybin might have made a new high today. Just checking.
Closed at 61.9 US, up 12.5%.
So today was a new closing high for year to date. Not an ultimate high, but new closing high. So congratulations on Doug Drysdale, doing a great job. The only company performing in this sector in very tumultuous times.
Had a very good conversation with him yesterday. Very good conversation. But the big takeaway I get, I think investors should be very, very excited about what they're doing, and these phase 2 results that come out. I think they're going to be announcing them around the end of November, early December. But if you've got something that's even more effective from what Compass achieved, you saw that share purchase agreement in the summer. It's like, who knows? Guys like Steve Cohen buying, who knows where this company and stock could go. This is the TDR Traded Black podcast on the Benzinga TV Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, along with Anthony Verrill and Benjamin A. Smith. That concludes our second segment, Daily Movers, as to who we're watching. That pretty much recaps the podcast for this week, guys. So just a quick recap of the show here today. As I bring up some of my notes, 5 notable companies file a lawsuit against the Massachusetts Attorney General. The federal agency finally released the letter to the public of what they submitted to the DA around 60 days ago. Air Wellness, not holding strong, but hasn't fully retraced like some of the other companies that rallied last month. And finally, to your point, Ben, Atai Life Sciences hits all-time lows this week, proving yet another reason why this sector right now, outside of Cybin, is just in dire straits right now.
Bitcoin's up 100% this year. That's the only thing we can say is positive, basically, right now. From a price action perspective,
seeing a lot of positive momentum online right now on TikTok.
So Tom Lee was on CNBC today saying that potentially the ETFs could pump 100 million in buying a day into the market. If Tom, well,
I'm not a big Tom Lee fan,
but full disclosure, Tom Lee is one of the crazy guys that said like 250K Bitcoin. He's a permabull. He's pretty fucking smart, and there's a lot of people that listen to him. That number, from an inflow perspective, I do take a little bit of merit towards, as that sounds about right. If you've got BlackRock, Fidelity, State Street, Vanguard, GBTC getting converted into a spot ETF, if they're automatically getting capital allocated to them just by 401k investing, the front end of that could look pretty aggressive.
Anthony, quick question for you, actually, for my own knowledge, because I'm not a Bitcoin specialist, but apparently there's going to be a halving, I think, of Bitcoin in 2024.
April.
So when that happens, does that mean that the supply doubles and that there's more supply, or nothing to do?
The halving has to do with the rewards that are outputted, nothing to do with the amount of actual Bitcoin in existence.
So there will always be 21 million.
21 million. That is finite.
That's it.
It is finite money. Granted, there are not 21 million right now in circulation. Ultimately, when everything gets mined, there will be 21 million. But yes, there will never be more, never be less.
Time to buy Bitcoin?
Sure.
We cannot give financial advice, Shad.
I wouldn't buy it. I mean, I would be careful. I would be careful right now on the move up. It hit 35 twice, hit resistance twice. It's floundered down to like 33 and change right now. And also keep in consideration, it is up 100%, like I said, on the year. It could easily go back down to 27. But there are very large catalysts on the horizon, and unlike cannabis, these aren't regulatory, or they are regulatory, but they're fundamental changes that can happen with the flip of a switch. If and when the SEC deems these spot Bitcoin ETFs as valid, the money's coming in to the sector.
Yeah. Before we go, all views on the Trade to Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice, and the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. All right, Mitch, in the background, can we have some beers?
I'll start the weekend of Pink Floyd.
Gentlemen, this is Shad Dale saying enjoy the rest of your week. Okay, guys, I appreciate it. This has been the TDR Trade to Black podcast. We'll have a quick recap of all the shows posting on Sunday night on our YouTube channel at 7 o'clock. Let us know some comments. You're suffering right now. Big, tough week regarding the cannabis industry. Anything we missed that we should cover, leave some comments below. We'd love your feedback because we would not be here without you. All right, gents, enjoy your weekend. And
get to the chopper!
Get to the chopper.
All right, see you guys.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to